Mark my words, Israel Adesanya is coming back, and he is going to be back, in my opinion, most likely by UFC 300. I think him and Dricus Du Plessis are going to have that match. That match that was supposed to take place before Sean Strickland beat the brakes off of Israel Adesanya. But now that Dricus Du Plessis won the title off of Sean Strickland, I can almost guarantee you that within the coming weeks, Dana White is going to announce the return of the last style bender. And I am incredibly excited for this match. However, this puts the middleweight division in complete pandemonium. First of all, Khamzat Chimaev is getting snubbed. And he might be pushed even further back in the line for a title shot if he doesn't act quickly. And on top of which, now Sean Strickland is in limbo, because of the fact that they are putting Israel Adesanya as a precedent, as a preference to face Dricus Du Plessis instead of a rematch from a very close fight. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ultimate Punching, the Ultimate MMA channel. I hope you guys are having a great day. Before I get started on the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, hitting the subscribe button, it helps with the YouTube algorithm and it helps me grow the channel. Just as a quick poll, let me know below who you think is most deserving of a title shot. A lot of people online are saying that it is not Israel Adesanya. He should have to beat somebody else first before he gets back in the title conversation. He's 1-2 out of his last 3. Lost to Alex Periera, win Alex Periera, lost to Sean Strickland. So a lot of people are saying like he should not get that immediate rematch. It was different back when he had this really long title reign, but he didn't really have much of a title reign the second time around. Now, what caused this loss to Sean Strickland? Who knows? Maybe Sean Strickland is just better, right? But a lot of people think it's because Israel Adesanya didn't take Sean seriously. He didn't really prepare for it. He thought he was just going to walk in there and beat the brakes off of Sean, and the reverse happened. Either way, when Israel Adesanya was initially planning to fight, he was planning to fight Dricus Du Plessis, but because of the scheduling, they put somebody else in there instead, and as we all know, the rest is history. But there's still that build-up. There's still that level of animosity there. And so Dana White, Hunter Campbell, the UFC execs look at this and say, okay, here is what we have been looking for. Now, because of this, Khamzat Chimaev was promised that he is the next title contender. He was promised the next title shot, the winner of Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland. And this was all due to the fact that back when he was supposed to fight Paulo Costa in October of 2023, a lot of people were saying, and I believe Dana even said this, that this was a #1 contenders match. Now, Paulo Costa pulls out. He had, I think, a staph infection, something like this. Who steps up? Kamaru Usman, a welterweight, not a middleweight, a welterweight. And even though Khamzat Chimaev was fairly dominant in the first round, and a lot of people thought he won all 3 rounds, some people even thought Usman won, but either way, that was supposed to get him that #1 contendership, being next in line for a title. And of course, with Izzy out of the picture, saying he's not coming back till 2027, you know, Khamzat Chimaev has star power, right? He is a guy that you could put on a card and people will tune in. But with Izzy announcing the fact that he's going to be ready for UFC 300 to face Dricus Du Plessis, and this is what's out there on social media, I could be wrong, that changes things, right? Because Izzy is one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and I would say his star power probably does eclipse Khamzat Chimaev, at least for now. But this puts the whole middleweight division in kind of a messy, a sticky situation, right? Because we have Dricus Du Plessis, who won fairly. You know, at the time of the fight, I was there live. I thought Dricus Du Plessis did enough to get the decision. But when I watched it again, you know, it was really close, right? I think that, you know, I'm happy that Dricus won, but if it had gone the other way, I would have been just as happy, right? Like, because it was a split decision, right? Because it was such a close fight, now we have a situation where, okay, what does Sean do right now? You know, does he get back in there with Khamzat Chimaev? Does he wait around for another title shot? Maybe he fights Jared Cannonier. They have a bit of unfinished business there. So, like, what does he do, right? Or does he fight the winner of Izzy versus Dricus Du Plessis? Because at the end of the day, it was a really close fight with Dricus. He beat Izzy 5-0 back in September of 2023. So, like, what happened, right? And because of the fact that I think Chimaev is so inactive these days, like, back when he first started, he was on a tear, right? I think he fought 3 times in 1 month in 2 different divisions, right? Then he got that fight with Gilbert Burns, and that sort of delayed things, and his COVID and his sicknesses, and he broke his hand, and his, I thought he had a great performance again. Compared to what people said, I thought he had a great performance against Kamaru Usman, who, is the welterweight king of recent times. Like, what happens here? Because, from my perspective, Chimaev's star power, like, it's still up there, but it did take a little bit of a hit over the last couple of years because he didn't have that string of activity, and the passport issues. And so now what we have is potentially 2 people who, at the very least, are equally considered for a title shot, right? We have Sean Strickland and we have Izzy. Right? Izzy's probably going to be the guy at UFC 300, but after that, Sean Strickland, probably, unless he decides to do something else. And then in February at UFC 298, we have Paulo Costa fighting Robert Whittaker. So the question is, if whoever wins out of that one, do they then take precedence over Khamzat Chimaev? Because right now, from what I can see, he's 3rd in line. And he might even be further back than that if, it's a really close fight between Dricus and Izzy, right? If Izzy wins, for example, and it's a really close fight, maybe they do a rematch there. Maybe they put Sean in there. I think at the very least right now, what Chimaev has to do is he has to fight a middleweight and absolutely dominate them if he can, right? Jared Cannonier, the winner of Paulo Costa versus Robert Whittaker, right? We have to see him get active again. We have to see him fight more than once a year. And I realize that this isn't totally by his design, right? I realize, and you know what? Even still, like, Periera might come back down to middleweight and take a shot at the middleweight title as well. Like, try to get that back. So there's a lot of things here that could put Chimaev on, like, push him back even further if he doesn't insert himself in the conversation. And he does all the time on Twitter, basically saying, like, hey, I'm next. Hey, I'm next. I'll see you soon. I'll see you soon. But you have to do both, right? You have to have, like, the Twitter game, the mic game, and you have to be relatively active, right? And I know that Dana White and Hunter Campbell and all these guys, they like to save their sort of Muslim fighters for Muslim cards, right? Like, they like to save Islam Makhachev for Abu Dhabi, right? They want to have Chimaev on an Abu Dhabi or a card in Saudi Arabia or something like that. But there still needs to be a way where he can insert himself and remain relatively active, because he's not on any cards at least until May, right? He's not on UFC 300. He's not on anything at 298. He's not on 299. He's probably, maybe he's going to be on 301, best case scenario. So, and then at that point, it'll have been 7 months since his last fight, right? November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 7 months since his last fight. And it's one of these things, like, you have to stay relevant. And the way you stay relevant is to stay active. So, yeah, middleweight is kind of in an interesting situation without, like, Izzy at the top, because there's so many people right now who could lay claim to a title shot. Right? You could have, like I said, Strickland. Maybe Periera comes back down. Maybe we have the winner of Paulo Costa versus Robert Whittaker inserted in the conversation. And Chimaev, although he was promised this, I don't see him being even in the top 3 choices right now for a title shot, unless he can go out and do something at middleweight that's incredible. Now, do I agree with this? No, I don't. And to me, one of the things that I think the UFC needs to do, especially if they're ever going to get to the level of like the NBA, the NHL, NFL, which like I think there's a lot of potential for this sport to become as big as some of these other sports, right? But there needs to be a level of standardization for how you get to a title, right? It can't just be this subjective thing for what Dana thinks is going to make the most money, at least not always. And the reason I say that is because if you look, and this isn't the first time that this has happened, right? He was the person who beats Paulo Costa would be the number one contender, right? Paulo Costa doesn't show up. Nobody else raises their hand. Now, Chimaev has to fight Usman on 8 days' notice. He wins, but now we're going to ignore the fact that he was promised that he would be a number one contender for beating the guy on that day, right? So... And the same thing happened with Bilal, right? Last year, Bilal fights Gilbert Burns, and everybody agrees that if he wins this, he is a number one contender, number one in line to face Leon Edwards. But because we don't like the way he fights, because of this, because of that, people are saying that they want somebody else to take his place for a title shot against Leon Edwards. Now, the big problem I have with this, right, is that now the decision is so subjective. So if you look at the other major sports out there, the NHL, to become the Stanley Cup champion, you need to win 16 games against 3 against the top 8 teams in your division and 1 against the top team in the other division, in the Western Conference, Eastern Conference, right? Within the NBA, I think it's quite similar. Within the NFL, they have their standards. And just because, they didn't score enough touchdowns or kick enough field goals or played a more defensive game or whatever, right? The commissioner, Gary Bettman, I don't know who the commissioners are for the other ones, can't just come in and be like, actually, you know what, we're gonna give it to the Toronto Maple Leafs because there hasn't been a Stanley Cup in Canada for 35 years, 40 years, I don't know, right? Like, he can't do that. So why can Dana all of a sudden just say, you know what, I think so-and-so is an interesting guy. Obviously he can because he's the boss. He's in charge, right? But without that standardization, I feel like the UFC is going to have trouble getting to that next level. The next level of being like a top 5 sport in North America or top 5 sport in the world. I could be wrong, but that's just the way I see it. So, like, come up with some sort of standard where if you beat 3 guys in the top 10, you get a title shot, right? Like 3 guys in the top 10 or 4 guys in the top 15, right? And you have to beat 2 within the top 10, 1 in the top 5, something like that. So, and then that way we don't have this like confusion. We don't have any of this sort of subjectivity. Once you beat 3 guys in the top 10, now you're next in line for a title. Something like that. And it doesn't have to be that rule, but I'm just saying, like, having this standard, having this in place, I think would go a long way to making the UFC like a more legitimate sport, more like on the lines of an NFL and NHL and NBA. I don't know what other stuff out there, Major League Baseball, whatever. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.